Hello and welcome to the Miracles and Grace podcast. I'm your host, Grace Mayernick Hackett, and y'all, it is surreal to be sitting here saying these words into a microphone and recording this. This podcast has been something that's been on my heart for 6 years, and so to see it finally come into fruition just doesn't even feel real. But I wanted to record an intro episode, if you don't know me, just to tell you a little bit about myself and what led me to start this podcast and kind of what you can expect as a listener. So let's get into it. I'll start by introducing myself. Like I said, my name is Grace Mayernick Hackett. Mayernick is my maiden name. Hackett is my married name. I've been married to Davey Hackett since September of 2018. And we have 2 little boys, Crew, who you actually heard on the intro singing Hey, 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 and then Bear. And then we have a little girl that's due in September, which we're so excited about. We will be dodging 3 under 3 by about 8 weeks, I think. So we love the chaos. It's really fun. And we are just in the thick of it with all the little babies. So we live in Franklin, Tennessee, which is a little bit south of Nashville, if you're not familiar. I am born and raised in the area, born and raised in Nashville. Davey was actually born in Memphis, but moved to Nashville really young and grew up in the Nashville area. And so people like to call us unicorns. We are both Nashville natives. And Davey is in real estate here, which he loves. If you, like everyone else, are trying to move to Nashville, hit him up, Hackett Homes. He is so great at what he does. But my job, I actually work for my family's nonprofit, which is called Love One International. And my mom started Love One in 2018. And I was graduating college around that time. And I graduated from the University of Tennessee, go Vols, with a child and family studies degree, which I really loved. I also had a minor in psychology, and I really loved what I studied. But it was kind of one of those things where if you graduate with that and you don't go get a master's, it's kind of hard to get a job in something that's related to that. And so when my mom decided to start Love One, I was like, yeah, I'll do this with you. So we kind of started it from the ground up, and it has just been so wild what God has grown it into. We have a rehab center in Uganda for critically ill and malnourished babies, and our center can care for up to 300 babies at a time and has changed and saved tens of thousands of lives. And so just to get to be a small part of what Love One is doing across the world gives me a lot of purpose. I've grown up traveling to Uganda, so many really close friends that live over there and a lot of people I care about. And so it's just a really purposeful part of my life. And I would say being a mom is my most purposeful title, and being a wife. But outside of that, to have something like Love One to get to be involved in is just such a gift. So that's kind of my work space. Something else about me that honestly a lot of you probably know, because there's a lot of us, and maybe you know one of my siblings, but I'm one of 8 kids. So my parents adopted 4 kids and had 4 kids biologically. I'm the second oldest. So I have a sister older than me named Tuta, who she joined our family when I was in college. She's from Honduras, and she is a year older than me. So I kind of grew up the oldest. And then when I got to college, the birth order shifted, and I became the second oldest. And she and I are really close. And then we have Michael, Annabelle, and Miller Ann, who my parents all had biologically. And then Joshua and Caleb were adopted domestically. And then Josie Love is from Uganda. So that's our family. My parents are Mike and Suzanne, and I'm extremely close with my family. You guys will get to know a lot of them on this podcast, which will be really fun because they're a really special group of people. Obviously, I'm biased, but if I'm going to choose who to hang out with on a Friday night, it's going to be my siblings. They're just the best. I also just wanted to give a little bit of context into what made me want to start this podcast, because for years I've actually had people on Instagram say, you should start a podcast. And it's funny because in 2019, I was sitting in a church service, and this couple got up and they shared their testimony about how their baby girl was healed. And it was the craziest story. I was like nudging Davey. I'm like, are you hearing this? And it was the whole service was such a crazy experience, because I couldn't tell you anything that the pastor said when they preached after this couple shared their testimony, because it was like I was so captivated by their story that I was just writing notes in my journal. And it was like God was downloading things to me. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. But one of the things that I really felt him say was, people feel like those stories only happened in the Bible. There's between 30 and 35 and 40 documented miracles of Jesus in the Bible, depending on what you consider a miracle. And there's a verse in John that says, he did so many more miracles than were even recorded. And it says, if every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that could be written, which is mind-blowing. But it's easy to feel like those were just a thing of Jesus' time, and that's not true. They happen every day all around us. And so I really felt like God wanted me to create a space for stories like that to live through the avenue of a podcast. And at the time, podcasts were not as big as they are now. But I did have a few friends who really were leaders in the podcast space. And so after that day, I reached out to them and just to pick their brains about what it looks like to start a podcast. And to be honest, as they were explaining it to me, I just got so overwhelmed. And I was like, I know nothing about anything you're talking about. I don't know about the technology side. There's so many moving pieces to a podcast, which I have definitely seen to be true through starting this one. But it just felt overwhelming and hard to me, if I'm being honest. And so I just kind of put it off. And it was so crazy because I went from this really strong conviction that I knew that was something God wanted me to do, but then it just felt complicated. And so I was like, that just feels like too much. And so I didn't do it. So that was in 2019. We'll fast forward to 2023. And it was really weird. I hadn't thought about the concept of this podcast or starting a podcast in years. And it was like out of the blue. It was all I could think about. I would be thinking about something completely random and my thoughts would get interrupted with thoughts of this podcast. And I could not shake it. And it was the first time in my life that I felt like, okay, God actually asked me to do something and I'm not obeying. And I felt really, really convicted because I'd put it off for so long. And so I told Davey that, and I went to my small group and I told the girls, like, hey, this is something I feel like I'm supposed to do. To be totally honest with you, I don't want to do it. It just feels like a lot to me. And mind you, in 2019, when I first had this vision cast for me, I didn't have kids. I don't know what I was thinking. I had so much time. And fast forward to 2023 when I'm actually like, oh my gosh, God gave me this and I need to be obedient. At that point, I had 2 kids. Nope, I had Crew and Bear was on the way, which is just a lot harder of timing, obviously, to start a podcast than when you're freshly married with no kids. Well, fast forward maybe a month or two, and it was October 30th, and I was pregnant with Bear, our second, and I had my first doctor's appointment on October 30th. On the same day, my dad had an appointment, and he, for like over a year, had been having some weird symptoms, like some weird neurological symptoms, like his muscles in his arms would twitch constantly. And he was diagnosed with a disorder where it's not fatal, but your muscles just twitch. And then in 2023, he started to lose some muscle and some ability to do things. And he was really concerned, obviously, because when his muscles were twitching, the doctors had said this can be a sign of ALS, but they ruled it out because he had no muscle loss. And so in 2023, he started experiencing some muscle loss and not being able to do certain things. And so he went in, and on the same day that we had our appointment, he was diagnosed with ALS. And I say that about my doctor's appointment because it was just such a weird juxtaposition of holding new life and having a baby and joy, and then also the greatest grief I've ever experienced. And like my whole world being turned upside down in a moment. And it was really, really hard. But I'll never forget one of the things that my friend Alex, who's in my small group, said to me after that. She said, and I have it in a text in my phone somewhere, she said, it's not a coincidence that God has been putting miracle stories on your heart for years, and then he swoops in and convicts you about creating the space for miracle stories a month before you find yourself in a season believing for a miracle in your own family, like you never have before. And I definitely don't think the timing was coincidental. And so, yeah, that is what has led me to start this podcast. And if you're tracking the years, that was at the end of 2023. And since then, I had a baby, worked through my maternity leave, took my maternity leave, got pregnant with another baby. It just, it's taken me a minute to actually get rolling and get this going. But I'm like, my yes is going to honor God, even if it's taken me a minute. So all of that to say, this is one of those things that I'm truly doing because I feel like God wants me to, and because it's an act of obedience. And if this reaches one person and they get to know Jesus better, or just get to know Jesus for the first time because of it, then it will be worth it to me. If it reaches 10,000 people, that's awesome. I'm holding it loosely, and I'm just trusting that God will honor my yes and that he's proud of me regardless of what comes from this. So that is what led me to start this podcast. And as far as what you can expect, I do want this to be a podcast full of miracle stories that make you pick your jaw up off the floor and you are like, holy cow, that's so crazy. And you cannot deny that there is, if you don't believe in God, you can't deny that there is some greater divine power out there doing these things, because it just defies logic and science. And I hope that that is what comes from this. Also, at the same time, I don't just want this to be a healing podcast, because I even speak for myself in saying this, but I'm sure there are a lot of people listening who are begging God for a miracle and for healing. That's where I'm at in my life, and I don't know if I'm going to get it from my dad. I know I will eventually, because he will be healed in heaven. But I'm praying for healing earthside, and I don't know if I'm going to get that. And I know there's a lot of people in the same boat, and I also want this to be encouraging for you, not just a place where you come and it's like, well, it's just telling healing stories, and why am I not seeing that healing, you know? And so I actually was originally going to name this podcast Miracles in the Meantime, because I wanted to tell the crazy miracle stories, but I also wanted to tell stories of people who didn't see the miracle that they were praying for, but they saw God show up in miraculous ways in the meantime of waiting. And that was going to be the name of the podcast for like years. Anytime I talked to someone about it, I would say that's going to be the name. And it was funny because my parents go to a church here in Nashville called ACC, and it was around Christmas, and their church has rallied around our family in such a beautiful way through my dad's ALS diagnosis. And we were having dinner with a lot of the staff, and it was over Christmas, and I was talking to Miles Fidel, who's the pastor, and he said, God has really been revealing to me that he is raising up the voices of your family through this journey, but he has specifically revealed that to me about you. And when he told me that, I was like, that is crazy, because I actually have felt God telling me to start a podcast, and it's been years, and I'm actually doing it. And so the timing of you saying that is cool and affirming, confirming. It makes me, sometimes you know what you're supposed to do, but it just feels good when God gives you little signs like, hey, you're on the right track, you're doing the right thing. And that was one of those moments for me. And he said, what are you going to name it? And I said, Miracles in the Meantime. And he was like, I like that, but I really think it needs to have your name in it. Not from a self-glorification standpoint, like you're trying to build up a name for yourself, but because you're not just a facilitator of these conversations. Like, you yourself are also in a season of begging God for a miracle and believing and praying for that. And that holds weight, and people need to know you and know your story. So when he said that, I really value what he says and his leadership and the way that he communicates with God. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to pray into what another name could be. And I prayed like, God, give me a name in a dream. Give me a name through somebody. Like, will you just, I was at such a loss. And there was one day that I think I was laying in bed one night and I had the thought Miracles and Grace could be the name, but I wasn't super amped about it. I was kind of like, okay, it's a maybe. And so I just sat on it, and I actually remember, so that was at the end of December. At the beginning of January, our church had an online service, and I prayed, God, would you either give me a name or confirm the name Miracles and Grace through this sermon? Like, will you just do something to confirm if that's supposed to be it or if it's supposed to be something else? Just like give me something. And I'm sitting watching this sermon, and it was a great sermon. I love our pastor. But there was not one thing in this sermon that was even remotely related to this podcast, to miracles, to my name, to anything, which is fine. I was like, all right, well, that wasn't it. So I guess I'll keep praying about it. And that is on a Sunday morning. Well, fast forward to that Sunday afternoon, and I was going to clean my house because, fun fact about my husband, his love language is a clean house. Fun fact about me, I'm a pretty type B person, and I don't mind some clutter and mess. So anyways, on this Sunday, I was trying to speak my husband's love language and really tidy up our house. And I was putting off cleaning up my house. And so I clicked on Instagram. And when I clicked on it, the first thing that popped up was my friend Sadie. And she had posted a story. And it was a Louis Giglio sermon. And she said, "This is the best sermon I've ever heard." And she is also a wise teacher. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if this is the best sermon she's ever heard, I bet it's a really great sermon. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to stop procrastinating. I'm going to listen to this sermon. I'm going to clean my house. And literally, I'll put the picture on this podcast. But the first thing that he says is, grace is God at work. And I've never seen a pastor do this. Maybe it's common, I don't know, but I've never seen someone do this. But he had an iPad that he was writing on, and it was airplayed to a screen. So you're seeing his face and you're seeing a screen, and it says written out, "Grace is God at work." And I am like, oh my gosh, if grace is God at work, then Miracles and Grace is stories of miracles and stories of God at work, which is essentially the same name as Miracles in the Meantime, because it's the miracle stories and the miracles in the meantime, God at work in the meantime. And so that to me was confirmation that that was supposed to be the name. And so that's why the name is Miracles and Grace. And another just side fun small God story is that as I was planning out the launch of this is such a small detail, but I love that God cares about small details. I really wanted to do hats that said miracles on them and grace. And literally I clicked out of this sermon and it took me back into Instagram. And the next story on my feed was from a boutique called Scarlet and Gold, a girl that I've gotten to know. She's great. She runs it. And her story said, if you want to do a custom merch order, hats, t-shirts, sweatshirts, etc., please reach out to me. I would love to work with you. So I was like, awesome. So she helped us get these really cool hats. If you're not watching the video of this and you're just listening to the audio, they're really cute. We have a red, white, and blue one and a black and cream one. But they say miracles on the front and then and grace on the side. So yeah, honestly, that is the high level of everything that I want you to know about this podcast and about what it's going to be about. My first guest is actually Bria Jean, this is another crazy side story, but she is the woman who gave her testimony at church when God gave me the vision for this podcast. And this is crazy. When I told my small group that I needed accountability for the podcast, I told them very high level about this girl's testimony that I heard. And as soon as I started telling it, one of the girls in my small group was like, I know her. I know that girl. I know whose story that is. I'll give you her phone number. And so when I asked them for accountability, she literally gave me the phone number of my first guest and the story that inspired the podcast. And so I'm really excited for y'all to hear their story. It's so beautiful and crazy. And there's so much to learn from it, not just from the miracle that God did, but from their posture in it and the way that they navigated the situation. Before I got to talk to her and interview her for this podcast, I've pondered and thought about the way that they navigated that situation for years. So really excited for y'all to get to hear it. But thank y'all for being here and thank you for listening. Honestly, at this point, I'm just so excited for this to be out in the world. This has obviously been a very long time coming, and truly, whether it impacts one person or 10 people or 1,000 people, it's in God's hands now. I feel like I've done my part and I'm just excited. And so if you do love it, there are things you can do to support. I literally had to ask ChatGPT, what can people do to support a podcast? Because obviously I'm new to this, but you can subscribe and follow the show, leave a review, especially on Apple Podcast. Share episodes with your friends, your family, on your social media. Engage with our social media. Follow Miracles and Grace podcast. Ultimately, the more y'all love this, the longer it is going to last. So if you love it, feel free to do those things. But either way, I'm just excited for what's to come and appreciate you being a part of the journey. So thanks for being here, and I'll see you soon.